I'm Rachel Myers, 33, and it sounds ridiculous, but I had to say this. My house knows how to scream, it just waits until I'm gone. On the very night I came home, Evan Brooks, my neighbor, a retired cop, leaned over the fence, his voice low like reading a report. Last night someone was crying out in pain in your house. The door opened. A strange cinnamon scent spilled out. The bed sheets were tucked with hotel corners. The chair was pulled tight to the table as if someone had just stood up in a hurry. Evan murmured, "Lock the door tight, okay?" The key in my hand felt cold, lodged in my throat. I couldn't swallow it down, and I couldn't spit it out. And the truth behind it will likely be hard to believe. When the ones holding the keys are the very people we love, the scariest thing isn't always out there, it's right behind the door we call home. Before I tell you what really happened, comment and tell me where you're watching from and hit like if you've ever suspected your home keeps secrets whenever you're away. I was born and raised in a family that wasn't very loving, where self-reliance was something I had to learn early. Now I'm an IT strategy consultant, a job that makes my travel schedule look like a chessboard already set. Boston, Denver, Boise, squares thick with notes plastered across the fridge door like moves waiting to be played. I live alone. Every time I slide the key into the lock, I pause half a beat to hear the house answer. A dry click, a crooked fold, an object nudged half an inch, those are the languages I've memorized. Early in the week, sunlight skimmed the stone countertop like a thin blade. The light revealed glossy wipe circles I knew weren't from my hands. I don't polish the kitchen, I just wipe it clean enough and leave enough time to live. A cinnamon scent slipped into my nose, sweet and cold at once. Not the candle I usually burn, but a blend of floor cleaner and something intent on erasing traces. Someone's been here, I thought, my hand still caught in the suitcase handle. On the table sat a tight vase of white lilies, every stem spaced as if measured. I like loose daisies that look like they're laughing. This vase didn't laugh, it said, "Order." My phone buzzed. Hannah, my close coworker, texted just one line, "Got the lock log yet?" I glanced at the keypad, my fingertip grazing a fine scratch like a nail testing the lock. "Hold," I replied, opened the app, and drew a breath. The log showed one entry right at noon. My mother Linda's familiar watering plants window. My throat went dry. "Mom, did you come at noon today?" I asked myself, but didn't call. I'm used to taking photos before asking, especially when my gut says I'm stepping into a scene. I swept the camera across the kitchen, the table, and stopped at the flowers. Hannah video called, looked for a second, then said flatly, "Not yours." "No," I answered. My voice was calm to the point of irritation, as if my whole body were trying not to shake. "Don't feel check," Hannah instructed. "Set the baseline. Everything else later." I nodded at the screen and hung up. In my head, a marker scratched across a whiteboard, baseline. I opened the spice drawer, labels faced the same direction, lined up to an uncanny degree. The cinnamon lid was strong, I couldn't remember the last time I'd used cinnamon. The sweet cold taste clung to my tongue, irritating like a stubborn reminder. I pulled a chair. It was heavier than usual, as if it had carried someone bigger than me for quite a while. The chair was pressed tight to the table, corners squared too neatly. Did someone just stand up in a hurry, or just finish playing a part that wasn't theirs? In the living room, the TV remote lay at a right angle to the table's edge. I always set it slightly askew so I can reach it. That right angle wasn't mine. "Okay, Ratch," I whispered, "home is my final boundary, anyone who crosses will have to leave footprints." The words were quiet enough for only me to hear, but they steadied my hands. I opened the shoe cabinet and took out the mini camera box I'd bought and then abandoned out of privacy pride. "Installing tonight," I texted Hannah. She replied with a thumbs up. Clear, terse, practical, classic Hannah. I headed up the stairs, each step a short count. The bedroom door opened, the cinnamon smell was stronger. The sheets were finished with hotel corners, seams ruler straight. I lifted a corner of the blanket and saw a fine loose thread. "Sorry," I whispered, as if I'd just ruined someone's artwork. I don't like apologizing in my own house, but today the house didn't feel like home. On the nightstand sat a wooden tray for keys. Metal flashed, then went dark. I picked up the key ring, the jingle sounded like a ritual. Lock. Verify. Record, I repeated the 3 verbs to steady my breath. I could call my mother right now. But I've learned to ask at the right time, not while anger's still hot. If you only watered the plants, why does cinnamon cover the whole house? I rehearsed the question in my head, listening to my voice test the space. A text came from Evan, my retired cop neighbor. "You're back? Lock up tight." I looked out the window and saw his shadow sweep past the white fence. I replied, "Thanks. If anything seems off, please tell me." The typing dots appeared, then vanished. I understood, his old job taught caution over chatter. I photographed every corner, kitchen, table, chair, doors, bedroom. Not to post. Because human memory loves to self-justify, the photos would remind me it was like this before I asked anyone anything. The back door opened and a breeze nudged the curtain. The chemical smell receded, giving way to grass. From the yard, the house looked perfect, so clean it seemed no one had ever lived there. A single word, perfect, was enough to unsettle me. The phone rang. "Hannah. Update? Too clean." "And cinnamon," I said. Hannah gave a dry laugh. "Cinnamon works for baking, not for logs. Install tonight." "Yeah," I answered, then hesitated. Han, if my sister really needed help, Mom could have told me. "Maybe," she said, "but grown-ups rarely like asking permission when they're sure they're right." I leaned back in the chair and looked at the photo of the 2 sisters hanging in the hallway. Sophie grinned wide, eyes closed against the wind. I smiled at the lens, shoulders slightly tense. The picture was the same, only today the frame was straighter than usual. Someone had adjusted it, and that very straightness made me feel off. Things that are too perfectly in place can be a sign of something out of line. I added a note, "Picture frame unusually straight." A cold patch spread in my chest like ink bleeding through paper. I remembered Evan's voice at the fence. "Last night someone was crying out in pain in your house." He pressed on the word pain, not arguing, not having fun. Pain. I checked the time. Too early to call, but too late to pretend I hadn't heard. "Linda," I whispered, using her first name like a boundary. "Tonight you'll have to answer." In my head, my voice was flat, clear, steady. The kitchen light clicked on, the glossy wipe circles grew sharper. "Don't tell, look," I reminded myself. "Look first, record after, ask last." That order saves me at work, maybe it'll save me now. If you've ever come home to a nameless scent, a fold you didn't make, an object suddenly 2 in place, who do you trust first, anonymous kindness, or your own gut? I don't have the answer for everyone. But I know mine. I slid the keys into my pocket and locked the back door. The small click sounded like a promise. I took out the camera box and whispered as if to an invisible partner, "Start with the living room." My hand settled on the phone. I didn't dial. I wanted the house to go fully quiet, then ask my mother in the flattest voice I could manage, "What time did you come, and with whom?" Out on the porch, wind threaded the fence, carrying a faint metallic clatter. I turned toward the sound and smiled slightly. Home is my final boundary. Anyone who crosses will have to leave footprints. Tonight, if the answer dodges me like a laugh behind a vacuum, I'll let the small hidden eyes in this house speak for me. And from here on, This story won't be too clean anymore. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, cinnamon still lingering, my hand clutching the key ring like an excuse to stay calm. The phone screen reflected my face and the oven door calm enough to be unsettling. I hit call. On the other end came the clink of a spoon against porcelain. Mom picked up, her voice light as foam. "Don't stress, I just made the bed." "Last night there were screams in my house," I said slowly. "Did you bring anyone in?" A soft exhale. "What kind of person do you think I am?" The question slid past my ear like a cloth draped over the truth. I looked out the window and saw my own flat face on the glass, a kind of calm I didn't even like in myself. "I'm asking to know, not to argue." Mom changed the subject as fast as flipping a switch. "Have you eaten?" "I left some pastries in the cabinet." "I'll stop by tonight," I said, promising nothing else. "Bring your keys." "Okay," she said, the spoon tapping the cup again. The call ended without a single answer. I locked the door and walked the path between two lawns to Evan's house. He stood in the garage, wiping a wrench, eyes on the street. "You heard?" he asked, not bothering with small talk. "I need to hear it from you," I said. "What did you see, and what did you hear?" He leaned against the garage frame and spoke slowly, pieces forming a picture, strangers coming and going on several nights, not loud, just off. The lights at my place turned down to a dim gold, the door opening without a knock, people moving like they knew the layout. "Not a fight," Evan concluded, eyes still on my house. That was the sound of someone enduring something. A small shiver ran up my neck. "What time?" I asked. "Around midnight to almost 2 a.m., he said. "There was another time before that, in March. And one more right at the start of June." "Did you call the police?" "Not certain enough," he said plainly. "I don't want to make a scene if it's just a mistake." But the feeling wasn't a mistake. I nodded. Thanked him, then walked back, opening my calendar on the phone as I went. March 10th, the night I flew to Atlanta. June 2nd, the night I landed in Denver. My business trips lined up in a straight column, like someone had borrowed them to schedule their own events. I opened a cabinet for my small notebook and wrote those 2 dates down. In the margin I added, "Too clean, cinnamon, odd flowers, heavy chair." I drew an arrow from empty nights to anomalies. The arrow looked obedient, like a child that knows how to behave, and that made me even more uneasy. The phone buzzed again. "Hannah, you okay?" "Barely," I texted back. "There's a pattern." She sent a magnifying glass sticker. "Then investigate, no feelings." I took another lap through the house, trying to put myself in a stranger's body, which door to enter, turn left or right, what to touch first. In the entryway, the doormat I keep slightly crooked for easy pull-in was now straight to the point of awkward. I tried to tug it heavier than usual, like it had been pressed down. I set the key ring on the table, the metal rolled once and stopped. In my head, a red dot blinked the recording light on cameras I hadn't installed. I pictured it reflected on someone's skin, a tiny red spot like a mole, and my heart jumped a beat. I called Mom back. She picked up fast. "Mom, let me ask this clearly," I said. "Did you bring anyone into my house?" "You're tired," she softened. I just refolded the bed and wiped the stove. "No one else." "The neighbor said someone cried out in pain last night," I kept my voice flat. "They misheard," Mom replied, her last syllable sliding away from responsibility. "Don't scare yourself." I looked at the circular white mark on the oven glass, watched a slow gold ring drift. "You still carry the keys, right?" "I always keep them, in case you forget," she said. "Tonight, I need you to bring them," I said, pressing each word. Silence on the line for half a second, then she agreed. The call ended again, still without the answer I needed. I opened my laptop and pulled up trips. March 10th to 13th, Atlanta. June 2nd to 6th, Denver. The remaining days, Boise next week. Next to each trip, I placed a red dot on Google Calendar. 3 red dots like 3 tiny bloodstains on white paper. I drew another line, Boise equals bait. Hannah video called, no warming up. When's your flight? Next week. Plenty of time to set up, she said. 5 eyes. Cloud. Audio. Disable LED. I pressed my lips together. What's the LED for? To let you sleep, Hannah said. But honestly, turn it off. Adults only confess to cameras when they don't know the cameras are there. I smirked, but my eyes didn't smile. Do you think I'm overreacting? No, Hannah said without thinking. If it were my house, I'd change the locks. But before changing locks, I'd change my habit of trusting. I looked at the keys on the table and saw the red dot blink in my head again. A micro CTA for you if you're watching. When you spot 2 clean clues like these, what do you do first? Change the locks, or change your habit of trusting? I stood up. The afternoon light slanted through the curtain, clinging to the wall like a thin gold streak. I grabbed a sheet of paper and quickly made a shopping list. 5 mini cameras, 256 gigabytes cards, adhesive mounts plus screws, cable ties, power strip, cloud account, picture frame style disguises, marker for tagging. At the bottom I wrote big, entryway, living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom. I rehearsed walking my house with unfamiliar eyes. From the door, where can a camera hide? In the kitchen, how much can the orchid pot cover? In the living room, any gaps on the gray-spined bookshelf? In the hallway, what height hears clearly but stays unseen? In the bedroom, which corner of the ceiling sees both the bed and the door? Evan texted again, want me to watch for strange plates? Yes, I replied. But don't take risks. Relax, he sent a police hat emoji. A bone-dry suburban joke that made me chuckle for half a second. After that, the hollow spot in my chest returned. I opened the closet and pulled out the old project backpack. Pocket by pocket, I planned to pack in the new eyes. I checked the Wi-Fi, changed the password, turned on 2-factor. Part of me hated turning my home into a circuit board, the other part felt steadier, finally anchored in logic. I called the nearby electronics store. I need small cams with audio and cloud storage. Can the LED be disabled? There's a model that can, the clerk said. How wide do you want the field of view? Max, I answered. And I need mounts that won't leave marks. Got it, he said, professional. You coming in 30? I'm on my way. Before heading out, I snapped a few more photos. I also set my phone on the table and recorded 10 minutes, not to catch anything specific, but to learn the house's silence level so I could compare later. The map in my head had its outline, now I was filling in the color. I looked back at the vase of white lilies. I moved it half an inch off center. A tiny, almost childish trap, but enough to talk to the future. If I leave and come back, it'll stay off center or not. I penciled a dot on the underside of the base. No one would see it, but I would know. In the mirror, my face looked less flat. I could hear my breathing steady, enough, unrushed. This wasn't defiance anymore, this was process. I lifted the keys and slid them into my coat pocket. The metal tapping my ribs woke me up better than coffee. I turned off the kitchen light and stood an extra beat in the soft dark. The red dot in my imagination kept blinking, not as a warning, but as a reminder, it's time. I opened the door, a gust slipped in, carrying the rustle of grass. The lock turned once, a short, firm click. I texted Hannah, heading out to get the gear. She replied, "Good. Don't forget the marker." "I know," I texted back. "And I won't forget Evan's line." As I stepped off the stoop, I added 2 final lines to the list: change locks after evidence and call mom, ask directly, record. I don't need to win with a shouting match. I need to win with the truth. On my way to the car, I glanced along the white fence. Evan stood there, saying nothing, just raising a hand. I raised mine back. We both understood, tonight I'd place new eyes in my house. And if a scream once rang out in an empty home, it will leave a trace, no matter how hard someone tries to wipe it clean. On the drive to the electronics store to buy the camera kit, the key ring in my coat pocket tapped against my ribs. That tiny jingle pulled me back to the first fracture. At 8, I was pushed onto a narrow bed by the window because Sophie wanted to turn the spare room into a studio for 3 weeks. 3 weeks stretched like an entire winter, soaking into the lace curtain and my cold feet. I asked, "When will it be over?" Mom patted my head, "When your sister finishes practicing." I nodded, pulled the blanket higher, and listened to music seeping from the next room like steady dripping water. At 9, the birthday cake sat in the middle of the table, but the thickest frosting drifted toward her side. "You're the older sister, so you yield," Mom said, voice even like a family spell. The dull knife made my slice crumble at the edges, while Sophie's was neat and square. I still smiled at the camera, but my teeth clenched the plastic fork. In my house, the word together always had a one-way path, from me to her. My books, she needs them too. My bike, she'll practice and return it. My coat, she's borrowing it for the performance. Returned was rare. Every time I hesitated, Mom repeated, "You have more, share for harmony at home." Dad nodded along, sharing at home is best. In high school, I tied my house keys to my wrist. After class came dishes, homework, watching my sister so Mom could make calls. I learned to fold myself into half a desk, leaving the other half for Sophie's box of markers. The boundary shrank from there, like a rubber band stretched too far. In college, I worked 2 jobs at once, evening shifts at the library and weekend TA hours. I learned to nod off on buses, to eat fast in 10 minutes, and to stash my own things in a locker with a key, the first lock I truly kept myself. The day I got the internship news, I bought a lightning bolt keychain. Marking territory, I muttered, half joke, half truth. At 29, I stood in the middle of the newly handed over 3-bedroom house. No human smell, just new wood and fresh paint. I opened every window, light poured in like water, and my lungs finally found enough oxygen. I tapped lightly on the door frames, tested every lock, listening for the house's heartbeat. That afternoon, Mom arrived, stood at the threshold, eyes sweeping the place, fingers resting lightly on her purse. "You don't have a family, why do you need this much?" The question dropped between the kitchen and the living room, light as foam and heavy as stone. I didn't answer. I only clenched the key ring until red grooves etched into my palm. Mom asked for a spare set just in case. I hesitated for a single beat, then opened a drawer and handed over a copy. When the metal touched her hand, a sentence surfaced in my head, clear enough to hear myself for the first time. "You call it sharing, I call it a bill in one name." I didn't say it out loud. I swallowed it like a small stone. In the years after, things were quiet in a suspicious way. On afternoons when I was gone, the vacuum hummed down the hall off my usual schedule, cabinet doors shut with a hard clack unlike my habit, and the floor cleaner smell laid on too thick. Mom texted, "I just tidied up a bit." I sent back a tight-lipped smile emoji. The door didn't swing open into another endless negotiation, at least for now. Then came the day a soft clack sounded in the hallway. The photo frame of the two of us suddenly straightened again. No wind. In the picture, Sophie clung to my arm, hair flying, mouth laughing. I smiled too, but my shoulders were a little tense. I nudged the frame a degree off. When I came back, it was straight again, like an invisible, well-practiced hand had passed by. That night, before locking up, I took another look around. The kitchen doorknob was clean in the just-wiped way, cold and slick. My kind of clean always keeps a faint print, some warmth. This clean didn't have me in it. I heard the keys rattle in the wooden tray, a tiny, steady rhythm, enough to wake both memory and suspicion. A red light blinked in my head. Boise would mean 3 days away. I needed a new rule set. I opened messages and typed to Linda, anchoring the timeline clearly before the Boise trip. I'm going to Boise for 3 days. You can water the plants, only the plants. I paused on only the plants, like adding an extra deadbolt. Scene popped up almost instantly. A few seconds later, her reply slid in with 3 dots in the middle. I'll try, you know how I am. The 3 dots felt like an ambiguous wink, teasing or warning. I wasn't sure. I only knew try meant no promise, and you know how I am meant the rules had never taken the side of boundaries. I slipped the phone into my pocket, my palm still marked red from the key ring. This time, I was determined not to let the keys live in someone else's hand, even if that someone was my mother. When the frame clicked again, very softly, down the hall, I turned my head and drew a slow breath. Come Boise, I'd have evidence instead of instinct. I started in the living room. The first camera slid between 2 gray spines on the bookshelf exactly at seated eye level. I tilted it 5 degrees so the frame could take in the sofa and tabletop. A strip of old paper, colored tape hid the lens rim. No light. No blinking. The second camera hid behind the orchid pot in the kitchen. I angled the lens through the leaves, testing a slow sweep: stove, island top, sink, and the table corner where the chair is usually pulled tight. 1, 2, 3, I whispered into the mic, played my own voice back clean enough, no distortion. The third went in the entryway, shoulder height, facing the door. I set a 3-second frame delay to catch every notch of the lock turning. A test upload to the cloud, the progress bar crawled like a worm, then turned bright green. Good. The fourth was in the hallway and I looking from the stairs toward the kitchen. I stuck the mount tight to the edge of the wall sconce, cinched the tie neatly along the wood trim. Hannah texted, audio still clear? Clear, I replied, attached a 5-second clip of my own footsteps. She dropped an ear emoji. The fifth went to the bedroom. Ceiling corner opposite the door, with a view of both the bed and the entry. I stood on a chair, hands steady, the faint sting of old ceiling paint in the air. The last press of adhesive made a small click, tidy as a habit. I photographed the scene one last time, the TV remote set at a 15-degree angle to the table edge, the blanket fold open exactly 2 fingers at the right corner, the lily vase with the long stem facing the window. 3 photos, 3 markers, 3 answers for later. Night 1, 1912. I turned off the lights, let the house breathe on its usual rhythm. Phone open to the app, 5 feeds lined up like tiny windows, living room still, kitchen a shade dark, entryway amber dim, hallway empty, bedroom flat as a lake. I set the phone on the table, poured water, and listened to the sound of my own swallow. 20:03, the doorbell didn't ring, but the entryway flagged motion. Linda. Mom unlocked the door with a key, stepped in with a fabric tote and a bottle of glass cleaner. I'm just watering the plants, she said to no one, as if leaving evidence for somebody. The camera caught a very short whistle, high note, broken. She watered the orchid, tapped the rim, water traced a perfect ring. In the kitchen, she sprayed a line on the island and wiped it into a pointless streak. Not dirty, still wiped. She adjusted the hallway frame, straight again. I watched the glossy white bloom on the screen, my chest hollow like a page over erased. 21:11, Mom left. Door locked. The feeds returned to calm. I sat still, head tilted at a question. If that's all, why was there a cry of pain? I dragged the scrubber back to the whistle. The waveform showed a small spike, evidence of habit. No one else appeared. 22:18, I texted Hannah, night 1, just Linda. So the baseline is real, she replied. Sleep. I stared at the screen and didn't turn it off. Some nights, sleep is how you shut your brain down. Tonight, turning the phone off would mean shutting my eyes. 22:58, entryway ping. The door stayed still for a long second and then hit a tiny snag. The knob turned halfway, stopped. A sound like a fingernail touching polished metal. No opening. No one in frame. I held my breath until my ears rang. I rewound, slowed to 0.25x. The reflection in the glass shifted angle enough to know someone stood outside, too little to name. My heart beat with the rhythm of the red rec dot. I heard myself whisper in the empty living room, fear isn't loud, it sits in the chair across from you and breathes with you. What would you do if you were me? Keep watching until morning, or turn it off and sleep to save your strength? 23:06, no more pings. I locked the app, wrote one line, 22:58 door snagged, didn't open. I took a lap through the house, laid my hand on each doorknob, felt the cold of metal that had breathed with someone from the other side. Back at the table, I set my own key next to the phone, a small promise to myself. Night settled like a heavy blanket. I set an alarm for 7 o'clock. At 8 a.m. I had a meeting with the India team. Before that, I'd open the feed at 6:30 and fast scan every missed minute. I texted Evan, someone paused at the door tonight but didn't come in. Could you watch for plates? He answered, if I see it, I'll note it. I turned off the lights and let the 5 window panes shrink to a single dot on the screen. The best night to tell the truth to yourself is the night with no one else, just your heartbeat and the sound of data saving to the cloud. 20:03, entryway ping. The lock turned smoothly the way it's done every night. A burly man stepped in, broad-shouldered, carrying a black canvas bag. He walked like he was coming home, no hesitation, no looking around. 2 women followed, one with a silver braid cradling a bottle of wine, the other wearing a beanie pulled over half her ear. The door clicked shut. Another guy lugged a folding chair, thunking the rug edge like taking roll. The lights dimmed to a soft gold. Candles flickered at 2 corners of the table. A low, soft bass murmured, quiet enough to sound like breathing. From the bookshelf, the frame, the camera gathered the whole room into its eye, the sofa, the coffee table, the hall mouth. No one looked into the lens. Every movement landed where it belonged, as if they'd rehearsed here. The silver-braided woman set the wine on the table, her hand brushing the wood edge I sanded myself. The beanie popped open a black box, the hinge clicking softly. Inside were cold, bright objects, their metal faces catching candlelight into red-orange streaks, laid out across the coffee table where I usually set my morning oatmeal. No one spoke loudly. Only the sound of a lid, leather sliding on wood, glass touching glass with a hush. The burly man took off his shirt, then was down to boxers, stretching along the sofa like a role he'd been cast for. The silver braid smiled, raised a glass. The folding chair guy tested the lights, killed more of the ceiling glow, left 2 candles. Bodies lengthened on the wall, slicing across the hallway frame. The frame straightened precisely again. A woman walked past the bookshelf. Candlelight bounced off the lens glass, throwing a small red dot onto her cheek. She paused for a fraction, tilted her head to look past the lens, not into it, then giggled, as if hearing a private joke. Beautiful, she said to someone behind her. The red dot faded with the candle's sway. My phone buzzed. Reminder, Zoom with the India team. I gave the 5 feeds one more beat. Entryway calm, living room warm and dim, a shadow leaning on the kitchen island, then clicked the link. My face popped into a tiny Zoom square, with Rachel, strategy underneath. Hi Rachel, can you hear us? I can, I said. Let's go through rollout milestones. I nodded. I smiled. I typed notes, the letters appearing like a machine: risks, vendor lag, mitigation, double slot. With every sentence I spoke, I sounded a little hollow, like my voice was going straight into cotton. In another tab, the feed kept rolling on mute. I didn't dare look. I didn't dare close it either. 30 minutes, 33 slides, 2 questions. Thanks, everyone, I rapped, my cursor sliding toward leave. Zoom folded shut, and the 5 feeds swelled like 5 lungs. The living room now belonged to them. On the coffee table, the bright objects lined up like stage tools. The boxer lay on his back, eyes half closed. The beanie knelt by the rug, holding something with a tightening strap. The silver braid tightened slowly, a precise, unhurried motion. The soft bass thumped like a far-off heart. I heard clipped laughter, a whisper right at an ear, glass touching with a ting marking each section. I eat breakfast at that table tonight, it's eating me in another way, I muttered without realizing I was speaking aloud. The words pricked my forehead like a needle. I set my hand on the edge of my own table, but this wasn't the real table, only the edge in the image. Even so, my skin rose in goosebumps. I scrubbed a few seconds forward. The hallway camera caught a figure walking into the kitchen, opening a cabinet, taking a glass. My kitchen had the sound of glass, my living room had the sound of wine, my house had human warmth, without me. In the entryway, the lock stayed quiet. In the bedroom, the blanket corner still gaped exactly 2 fingers, just like the baseline photo. They hadn't gone upstairs. They didn't need to. The living room was enough. I nudged the volume just high enough to hear the background breath. There were no screams. There was only the sound of enduring long, steady, exactly as Evan had said. A kind of silence with weight. The phone rang. Unknown number. I glanced at the feed, then answered. Hello? Hi, is this Rachel Myers? A male voice, calm, official. This is Officer Brennan with Maple Glen Police Department. I straightened even though I was sitting. Yes, this is Rachel. We're responding to a report of a gathering at your residence tonight, he said, cadence like reading a report but not cold. Are you aware of anyone currently using the property? I looked back at the screen, one person standing, pulling the curtain halfway, another walking past the camera with a bottle like passing a mirror. No, I said, lips dry. I'm not home. Some individuals on site expressed concern after discovering surveillance devices inside the home, he continued. Your parents are currently present and stated they had permission to use the space. I closed my eyes for a beat. Silver braid, I knew the perfume. Linda. They didn't, I said, my voice oddly flat. I told my mother she could water the plants. That's it. Do you have that message? I do. I can send it. Thank you, he said. We may contact you for a formal statement. For now, please be aware there could be zoning or licensing issues under review. The way he said zoning made my house shrink into little squares on paper, and me reduce small like a legend symbol. The call ended. I didn't move. On the feed, a candle leaned. The red dot reflected and blinked on the woman's cheek, then died. I heard the faintest beep of data pushing to the cloud, the smallest sound of the night, and the only thread tying me to the evidence. The call with Officer Brennan had just ended, the screen still split into 5 feeds when the phone buzzed again. Still unknown number. I picked up. It turned out to be my mother, calling from Robert's phone. Linda's voice dropped, urgent, like someone pulling a curtain over a brightly lit room. Just say I had permission to use the house. Just this once, to avoid trouble. I looked at the blinking rec dot in the corner of the screen. No, I said. I'm going to tell the truth. A heavy breath came onto the line, then Robert's voice, measured to the point of irritation. Your house is neutral, people trust it. In this area, your place, not many people know it. All the more reason no, I answered. I hung up. Nothing further. 3 days later, when the candlelight, silhouettes, and bassline had flattened into timestamps inside a folder named Evidence, I received a Facebook message from a stranger with a floral handle. The opening was polite to the point of estrangement. I'm sorry. I didn't know you weren't aware. If you need it, here's the site they use. Along with a link. The website opened to a meditation interface, pale beige background, thin fonts, breathing circles like a breathwork app. A large line slid up like a lullaby with an agenda, freedom through trust. Beneath it was a grid calendar, labeled private, curated, with a note rotating safe spaces. I scrolled. March. June. Next week. Every event square matched perfectly with every one of my flights. The photos were intentionally blurry, but the lip of the wooden table in one shot was unmistakable, the leaf-shaped grain I sanded by hand, right where there's a dark speck like an old coffee drop. Another image clipped the edge of the plain rug, what Mom had once called too simple. The yarn curled slightly at the corner, I knew because my own hand had yanked too hard there once. The About section was polished, scrupulously avoiding any transactional language, no services sold. Community by choice. Suggested donation. At the bottom, 3 round dots displayed numbers like velvet-wrapped candies, $400 to $850, $1,000. Each tier came with vague lines: privacy level, select group, experienced facilitator. Top right sat the host portal. I hovered over the envelope icon, a truncated host email appeared, l.a@. I copied the blurred string, pasted it into a notepad, stripped out the masking characters. The name revealed itself like a blade catching light, Linda's hippie era nickname spliced with a birth year, spelled backward. I sat up straight, my palms suddenly colder than the tabletop. This wasn't a one-off helping my sister. This was a system, rotating calendar, rotating spaces, rotating donations. Passwords passed hand to hand. My travel gaps became convenient openings. And my house a listed point on a closed map. I opened testimonials, all elliptical lines healing, non-judgmental, right vibe. A black and white photo showed the base of a wine glass and the table edge. I zoomed in, a small bean-shaped dark mark appeared on the wooden lip, the scratch I kept promising I'd sand out. No mistaking it. I heard my own voice come out, dry and hard like reading a report. They didn't borrow the house, they listed it. The kitchen threw my words back at me, hollow and very real. I took screenshots, the calendar, the donation tiers, the blurred photos, the wood grain, the rug. I saved one set to the hard drive and another to a different cloud. The folder was named with date and time, notes reading source, anonymous guest, FB. I didn't want one more argument built on feelings. Another message from that account arrived. I didn't know they were your parents. I thought you agreed. I'm sorry. I understand, I replied. Thanks for the link. I didn't ask for a name. Adults are entitled to believe what they want, especially with a listing wrapped in the word trust right in front of them. I closed the laptop, a chill running along my wrist. Confrontation has to happen, but it doesn't need a scream. I need time, evidence, and questions that can't be dodged. Who handed out the passwords? Who collected the donations? And why were they so sure I'd say I knew? When the evidence folder was full to the brim, I set the kettle, cleared the table, and sent a text, "Let's meet tonight." I invited Linda and Robert over for 7 p.m. The dining table was bare except for a thick folder in the middle, printouts of the website calendar, screenshots, the door lock logs, and the case number from Officer Brennan's call. The electric kettle chirped once. Mom calmly poured tea. "We handle this in the family." I slid the folder toward them. "This is my in the family." Robert pulled out a chair, his eyes skimming each sheet. He cleared his throat, even, as if presenting an argument. "You're gone all the time. The house sitting empty is a waste. In this neighborhood, a neutral place, people trust it." I set my key ring on the table and turned it. The metal drew a thin line of light across the wood. "There's no such thing as a neutral house, only people neutral about my boundaries." Mom looked down at the counter, where a dry streak of cinnamon I'd deliberately left still lay. Her finger brushed it, trembling a touch. I let silence stand between us, the length of 2 breaths. I opened the folder. The first page was the web calendar, March 10th, June 2nd, next week matching all my flights. "This is the rotating safe spaces calendar," I said slowly, pointing to each box. "And here the donation tiers, $400, $850, $1,000. The photos are blurry, but this wood grain is my table. This scratch also mine." Linda closed her eyes for a beat. "I just wanted to help Sophie. You know your sister." The host name, I cut in, sliding over the notepad with the email string. "Your hippie-era nickname, fused to a birth year, spelled backward. Not impulsive. Organized." The phone buzzed. "Hannah, I'm at the door if you need me." I replied okay, and set the phone face down. Through the window I saw Evan standing farther down the lane, hands in pockets, eyes on the gate. I wasn't alone and I didn't need to raise my voice. Robert leaned back, trying to keep composure. No one was hurt. It was just a gathering. "You're making this big." "Zoning, licensing, and unreported income," I read flatly, like a report. "Plus trespass on titled property after permission was revoked." "This is the plants text you read." I placed the printed thread next to the teapot. Mom opened her mouth and closed it. "Don't confront us like enemies. We're family." "We're dialoguing," I said, pointing to the pen already set out. "And this is my way to dialogue, sign." I pulled out 2 pages, commitment to return keys and no trespassing and acknowledgement of unauthorized use of the house plus immediate termination. At the bottom, an italic line, "If not signed, the file will be submitted with evidence to the city and PD at 9 a.m. tomorrow." I pushed the pen toward them. My counterpunch isn't a fist. It's the sound of a pen signing. Robert's face hardened. "You're threatening your parents?" "The legal name for that is notice," I said. "And here the lock change work order is scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. The old keys stop working right after you sign, or on schedule, with or without signatures." Linda took the paper. She read line by line, her eyes slowing at reimbursement of costs, rekeying, city fines, deep cleaning. "You're making me pay?" "The legal name for that is consequences." I kept my voice level. "Whoever listed the space pays the bill. I don't sell the house. I don't rent the house. And I definitely don't share the house to legitimize appropriation." The only sound was a spoon tapping a cup. Hannah texted again, "If they need time, count to 10 then restate the terms." I set the phone down and chose silence. Evan still stood in the lane, a quiet period at the end of every detour. Finally, Linda set down her cup and looked straight at me. "If I sign, will you forgive me?" "The everyday name for that is a beginning," I said. Not forgiveness yet. The stopping of harm. Robert looked at his wife, then at the pen. He exhaled, long. We don't admit bad intent, he said, but his hand had already taken the pen. We signed to end it. The nib hit the paper with a dry scratch. Linda signed first, her stroke shaky but clear. Robert signed after, firm and final. I gathered the pages, clipped them into the folder, and tucked in the copies of their keys they set down. I picked up my own keys and turned them on the wood. The small line of light flared and went out. From now on, everything goes through writing, I said. If there's something about Sophie, text Hannah, she'll triage the calendar. You no longer have the right to enter my house. I stood and opened the door. No hug, no tears. Only the porch tiles receiving the steps that left. Evan dipped his head, Linda paused half a beat before crossing the gate. Another silence stretched exactly 2 breaths lighter than before. The next morning, I brought the folder to City Hall. The zoning department accepted printouts of the website, the rotating safe spaces calendar, blurred photos with my tables with grain, the lock logs, and the plants-only note. I said little, let the paperwork speak. At noon, my attorney sent a cease and desist to the host email and the P.O. box under Linda's reversed name with a list of violations, unlawful use of a residential space, unauthorized assemblies, and promoting events disguised as fee-based services. In the afternoon, I filed a Form 3949A with the IRS, under unreported income, listing the donation range of $400 to $1,000. Not bitter, just precise. I changed the locks at the 10 a.m. appointment, invalidated all old keys, deleted fingerprints in the app, reset the keypad, changed the Wi-Fi password, and enabled a geofence. Any phone that had ever connected returning near the door would trigger a silent chime and send me an alert. The house felt like a body regaining its immune system. That evening, my attorney texted, hard copy sent by certified mail. City and PD notified. Hannah sent a photo. The no trespass notice had been filed and system confirmed. I looked at the new keys resting in the wooden tray and felt my hands shake less. A week later, Linda's pride in a trusted community was renamed into fines and summonses. A yellow envelope from the city on zoning, a white envelope from the tax office, and most absurd, a private suit from the very anonymous guest, deceived about privacy upon discovering cameras. I read it, drew a red line under permission misrepresented, and forwarded it to my attorney with a note, homeowner did not grant permission. Evidence attached. Sunday morning, Linda lined up cups of tea no one would drink on the dining table. A plate of cookies sat in the middle, crumbs minimal, the kind of cleanliness trying to rescue the air in the room. Robert stood at the doorway, holding the wooden love sign he'd just taken down. Behind him the wall showed a pale rectangular patch of paint, a blank space that said more plainly than any words. My phone rang. Sophie. Happy now? Her voice sharp, dry. The city sent papers, the bank's asking questions, we have to move. I looked at the suitcase already open on the floor, the zipper stuck at one corner. Inside were packets of desiccants still smelling like new fabric. I didn't take anything from you, I just gave myself back to myself. Silence at the other end, then Sophie added, if you weren't so rigid. Mom wouldn't have done it. No, I answered, gently. If Mom respected boundaries, no one would have had to do anything. At noon, the geofence flagged a hovering ping at the gate. Evan texted, I'm out here. The entryway camera caught a figure pause a few seconds, then leave. No more keys. No more neutral. Only a white fence and a gate that knew how to say no. That night, I sat at the table, turning over each fine, each summons. Not drunk on victory, just the feeling of having redrawn a map. The place that had been listed became a home again. I signed a contract for a deep clean service, with deodorizing and new carpets, sent an expense reimbursement invoice with a payment deadline. The attorney said, the other side may want to negotiate. I nodded. Negotiation still has to start with stopping the harm. I opened the window and let the night air in. On the counter, the dry cinnamon streak had vanished after the cleaning, but the memory of it sat exactly where it had been, like a bookmark. I set the live, laugh, love magnet at the bottom of a drawer, beneath a stack of camera manuals. What used to be displayed to cover truth now sat where it belonged, hidden and honest. On the 10th day, the mail piled up at Linda's. Robert held the old wooden sign and didn't put it back. Linda didn't brew a fresh pot of tea. Sophie didn't call. On my side, all access accounts were revoked, all cameras stayed where they were, not to catch anyone anymore, but to let me rest easy. The house returned to its normal rhythm, the dishwasher's low hum, wind threading the curtains, wind chimes touching once, then quiet. The apartment is smaller. The smell of fresh paint is still warm in the air. The window catches the blue glow of the street sign outside, sliding across the wall like a thin sheet of water. I set a tin box on the shelf, open the lid, and drop in the old ring of keys. Metal clinks against metal, a ritual for closing a chapter, no incense required. The phone buzzes. Evan texts, "The neighborhood is quiet now." I reply, "Thank you, quiet is what I need." Hannah knocks in her familiar 3-beat rhythm, holding out 2 steaming paper cups. Getting any sleep yet? I give a tired smile. This time, the bed is made by me and only I know how to undo it. She taps her cup against mine, says nothing. Some friendships don't need advice, they just stand in the wind for a while. I open the suitcase and stack 3 new bedding sets. No more cinnamon smell, no overclean wipe marks. The live, laugh, love magnet goes in the last drawer under a stack of camera manuals, exactly where it belongs, hidden and honest. I flip the switch and look around. The apartment has exactly 1 red dot, the indicator light on the smoke detector. Harmless. And enough. There's no loud forgiveness tonight. There's only cleaning out my chest, moving old expectations, rest-tacking the silences that used to drain me. There's no forced reconciliation, only the decision to stop pretending the old orbit is still safe for me. I choose boundaries the way you choose a new lock, fits the hand, solid and quiet. A text from an unknown number flashes and goes dark. I don't open it. Some questions are answered by time and paperwork, not by midnight and tears. I draw the curtain halfway so the blue outside thins into a single line. Below it, the tin box sits open, holding the cluster of keys that once opened my house and once opened my peace. I sit on the edge of the bed. The sheet is smooth, the blanket folded my way, not hotel tight, just neat enough to breathe. I remind myself, blood doesn't exempt you from boundaries, love doesn't include the right to occupy. If I have to choose between keeping the peace and keeping myself intact, this time I choose the latter. I turn off the light. The room settles into a gentle dark, with only the smoke detector's red dot pulsing softly like a steady breath. No more red camera dots in my imagination, no more sound of a key turning from the other side. Only the hum of the AC and the brush of sheet against skin, the small sounds of safety. If this story touched you, share a piece of your own experience in the comments. Someone searching for courage might recognize themselves in your story. And if you found value here, a like, subscribe will help more people find stories about safe boundaries. I close the tin box. A neat little click, just enough. The frame closes on the key box lid shut, quiet, and this time, the quiet is mine.